Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Here we are going to discuss and explore true crime mysteries and historical facts. This is my name and together we'll try to understand why humans do what they do. Today I'm going to tell you a story about a woman whose life was full of intrigues, illicit affairs and horrendous deeds. Vera Renczi was the most prolific serial killer in Eastern Europe. She was rich, powerful and unstoppable for many years. It's time we dive into Vera's mysterious life and find out exactly what is going on. Vera was born in 1903 according to some sources, or even earlier according to others. There aren't a lot of information available. However, we know that Vera was born in Bucharest, Romania. Bucharest at that moment was, at the end of the 19th century, was a mix of Western culture and Orient. Rich people called boyar were sending their children to universities or directly into high societies of France, Italy, Germany in order to learn, in order to study there and of course bring new ideas. What they wanted of course was to modernize, and in order to do that, in order to modernize the society, they needed new influx of ideas. And this influence was seen in the streets, was seen in the buildings, was seen in the city development planning, cultural activities, and even in the language, if you can imagine. High class was importing words from French or Italian and they were mixing it up, and it just was a mumble jumble of new and old words. And of course, this was just a way of showing that they were modern and up to date. It's quite similar to what we are doing now. Of course, at that moment was much, you could see this difference in a much bigger way. It was more observable. Going back to Vera, Vera's mother was Romanian and her father was Serbian. Back in the day it was Habsburgic Empire, and it seems Vera's mother was not marriage material because she was left with her but not with her father. So her father went back to Serbia to his Berkerek estate, and Vera was left with her mother for many years, and it seems she was the main caregiver for Vera. Vera's father, however, had properties, mansions, servants, and it was very common in those days to have mistresses and father illegitimate children. And Vera, of course, was an illegitimate child. Vera will remain with her mother until she was 13 years of age. Then a tragedy struck in Vera's life. Her mother dies. We do not know if she was murdered or if she died of natural causes. This is something, it's not clear. However, what it is clear, it changed something in Vera's later behavior. And what many of you, and including myself, know from later serial killers, what is very important is mother-child relationship. And we don't know if Vera's mother was abusive with Vera or on the other side it was really caring for her. However, I found a study in which it showed mother-child deprivation even of 2 weeks can lead to aggression, can lead to behavioral issues and even early sexual intercourse. I linked into the description below the study if you want to check it out. It was very interesting for me because I highlighted exactly what I found to be prevalent in Vera's life later on. You could see actually that Vera started becoming aggressive, started having sexual intercourse early on, and more details you will hear later on in the stories. For all serial killers, one key aspect, as I mentioned, was the mother-child relation, and Vera will just be one of many. Going back to her biography, Vera is left without her main caregiver. During those days, it was common for illegitimate children to be sent to orphanages or to be sent to an aunt or to an uncle to be taken care of. Instead, Vera was taken by her father, and this for me was very strange when I found out. For 13 years old, he didn't care much, but later on in Vera's life he would be present. So interesting to find out why. It wasn't clear, but we know that actually he brought back Vera to Serbia, to his Berkerek estate. This shows us that her father cared about her. Not only that, Vera was sent to a boarding school for a better education. And here I'm going to pause for a bit and to explain how boarding schools were seen back in the 19th century. If you are from US and if you are interested or your parents sent you to an Ivy League school, definitely boarding school in the 19th century, especially in the Habsburgian Empire, would be the equivalent. You would go maybe to Harvard or to maybe to Stanford, and you definitely were on the path of getting a better place in your society. And back in the day, especially rich people would send their offsprings to boarding schools for higher education or secure a spot in the society. Women didn't have a lot of chances, however, they were able to marry better if they had an education. And that is why I assume it was a combination of deliberate maneuver to elevate Vera's social status and pure planning. At the end, she came from nowhere. She came from a no man's land, Romania, Bucharest, into a new society, of course Habsburgic, but not the high society, and she was not recognized by her father. She was an illegitimate child. Nobody in the community knew who Vera was, and I'm sure her father wanted her to be marry better than with his local servant or maybe to a local bank man. So thus new chapter in Vera's life will begin, boarding school. And Vera will arrive at the boarding school and started to meet her new colleagues. It seems she thrived. She had the time of her life. And not only she began to manipulate her roommates into covering for her, she actually had sexual intercourses early on. That's right, guys. Her roommates, of course, were enchanted by her cunning way, sensual, and absolutely captivating presence in the room. Vera knew early on how to control the persons in front of her, how to yield her will over others, and get away from otherwise dangerous situations. Let's be real, boarding school stories are of two kinds. Either absolute horrific with all unimaginable abuses, sexual, emotional abuse, or the time of their lives. And Vera will fall into the second category. Vera will have absolutely yield everyone and make sure that everyone was listening to her. And I would imagine Vera would be the kind of person you bring to your party, to your birthday party, and you would present Vera with your boyfriend, and Vera will definitely go after the party and will take your boyfriend and will steal it from you. And those persons are charismatic, and Vera will be famous in the boarding school, and she will be famous even in her community, guys. Vera will appear in the local newspapers for her promiscuity, for her sexual behavior, and her love affairs. Love affairs with boys, love affairs with men twice her age. Her boarding school colleagues actually mentioned she had an almost pathological desire to control, manipulate, and make sure men would do what she wanted. And in other words, she wanted to be the center of attention no matter what. And she found whatever she wanted, and if she wanted that man, of course, she would take him. And this is what Vera will do. She will find her first husband, Karl Schick, nice name. Karl was an influential Austrian banker, and it was Vera's deliberate plan to marry better than a simple officer. She wanted to be with an influential rich because she wanted to elevate her social status. And it would not be her first time, it actually not be the last time Vera would use such type of methods to persuade Karl to marry her, since he was clearly out of her league. In those days, the Habsburgic Empire was a mix of nationalities, and by far to be Austrian would be to be a first-class citizen. Second, to be rich would be even higher level. So not only she will marry an Austrian, she will marry a rich Austrian guy. So you could see she started aiming high and she knew what she wanted and she knew how to get it. For a time, Vera was a housewife, and contrary to the prediction, she was staying at home. She made sure her marriage was well attended. Not that she did any house chores, guys. She didn't started cleaning the windows or anything. She actually had servants for this. Normal life in those days. Carl, being an older, successful man, had a lot of businesses to attend. He would go out, and Vera was having none of it. She was starting being jealous of him being able to go out, and by this time she was pregnant, so of course even her chances of going out were getting reduced by that. And she started fuming like a dragon because she started suspecting Carl was having an affair with other women, with other men. She would give birth to her son Lorenzo and start preparing a plan on how to kill Carl. And that is right, guys. In her twisted mind, the fact that Carl was or suspected of being unfaithful deserved to die. And she started concocting a plan, she started preparing everything, and she chose arsenic for her deeds as her weapon of choice. In those years, arsenic was widely available in pharmacies and used to get you will use it in order to get rid of your pests. Of course, in Europe, by now, a lot of people were aware that by using arsenic, you could get rid of those people who you didn't want anymore in your life. And they were bothering you. For example, if you had a brother or if you had a son or even you had a wife and you would want to inherit their money, their wealth early on, this would be an easy method. What I found extremely sad is that even women who were not able to divorce, since divorce was not available in those days, or you would get with nothing, there were women using arsenic as a way of getting rid of their abusive husbands. And for me, this is really sad. Imagine a society in which the only way that you could be alive and safe would be to use a poison to get rid of your abuser. This is absolutely horrific. But going back to arsenic, it would mean, of course, that everyone knew it was called inheritance powder. Arsenic was named even from the Roman Empire in some documents, and it was as common with existing diseases who were rampaging at that time. So there was no way into knowing that actually you are being poisoned or you are suffering for legitimate disease that was happening at that moment. There were no laboratories, no way to prove what it was. The poisoned individual was dying slowly or rapidly depending on the dose used, and this could happen from morning till afternoon or even to lunchtime. And this means in half of day you could be dead of arsenic just because somebody wanted to poison you. By morning you would drink the poison and by lunch you could be dead. Yep. Symptoms were horrific: diarrhea and vomiting, very common with other diseases and no way of knowing the exact cause of that. Doctors were completely useless. They were not able to determine anything, and they would probably just drain blood or bring leeches or any other torture way in which they were trying to determine, they were trying to find out, but of course they would not be certain. And this is how Carl died. Vera told everyone Carl left her for another woman and he was in Romania, so they should not care about him. She essentially played the victim's card while she was putting Carl into the zinc casket into her cellar. And this is when we found out about her method of killing. She would use arsenic, she would bring the cadavers into her cellar, and she would put the cadavers into the zinc casket. And this was not the usual potato cellar or the wine cellar or whatever cellar those rich guys had. Instead, it was a room designated specifically for her deeds, specifically for her lovers. After 1 year, Vera announced to everyone Carl died in a car accident in Romania and now she's a widow. She falsified a letter of the authorities, and thus she was inheriting all Carl's money. This was her first known killing, and unfortunately it was her husband, Carl. Second and last marriage, guys. Vera would not be a widow for long. She would meet Joseph Renczi and would marry for the second time. Joseph as well was a wealthy businessman, and Vera again would be a lady of the high society, admired and desired by men. She would get invited to all these cultural activities. She would get invited to different meetings, and this is what Vera wanted. She wanted to feel admired, and she wanted to be the center of attention. And she would use the same method as for Carl, because soon after she started being jealous of Joseph, and she started suspecting that actually he was not faithful to her, and thus Joseph must die. And this was Vera's decision, twisted decision. She would use the same method as for Carl. She would poison Joseph with arsenic in his coffee. Anything that is not supposed to be done to another person. Going back to our story, when she killed Joseph, she took him to her secret cellar and thus had her second husband there. Actually, I'm not really sure how she managed to put a man into a zinc casket, because I'm sure she wasn't able to tell to her servants, come here and do your job. Actually, take all the body and put it in the zinc casket. Curious to find out how she was able to do just that as a woman, but we don't know. We can only imagine. Let me know in the comments below, how would you see this fit? By now, Vera will decide she will not marry again. She will be a widow. I truly believe it was a deliberate action of hers not to marry again, because it was much easier to go undetected. For me, I see this was a deliberate maneuver. This was something that she thought she would get away much easier. But let me know what you guys think. Maybe you have other point of views which are more interesting than mine. Please do so. And in my perspective, married men having affairs with rich aristocratic women wanted to hide their tracks. You could not say to your wife or your friend, I'm going to meet and spend some nice kinky time with a rich woman. I'm going to her estate and do some, not to be spoken here, but you can imagine. No, they had to hide their whereabouts and lie, dismiss, or simply fabricate a story to go outside for many days. And this is how I imagine Vera chose her victims. And this is how she managed to kill for so long. Married men would not tell to their wives or to their community or to their friends where are they going. However, Vera was rich. She was untouchable by police in those days, even though there were rumors in the community that, look, men are going to Miss Vera Renczi's estate and are never to be seen again. It doesn't mean that police were doing anything. Vera and people like Vera by now, which she would have a lot of influence, she will have a lot of money. They were above the law. They were the law, guys. What you guys think? If you have other information, what you guys think police acted, or if they acted in the right way by just letting the rumors and not doing anything for so long. Vera will continue killing her lovers, and she had a lot of them, and she put them into zinc caskets and going back to her cellar, to her little nook. Yes, she had a cozy nook. No, not that. Actually, much more sinister. One day her son Lorenzo, by now he was 10 or 11 years old, was curious why his mother was spending so much time in a secret room in which he's forbidden to enter. He was a normal teenager. I was a normal teenager, and if somebody would tell me you are not allowed to go there, the only thing they could achieve was for me wanting to go more, wanting to see more, and not to follow the rules of some adult was asking of me. So in this case, you would see why Lorenzo was going into a forbidden room in which he was not allowed to go. And this is when he started following his mother and discovered her secret. And unfortunately for Lorenzo, he found Vera's lovers into zinc caskets, and Vera decided this is a liability for her and she must continue with her twisted crimes. Therefore, she started poisoning Lorenzo, her own son. And unfortunately, Lorenzo will meet the fate of his father and Vera's lovers and end up in the zinc caskets. And Vera by now would commit the most horrendous act a person can do in this life, in my opinion, and this is killing her own living child. And beginning of the end for Vera would come into a form of another woman, and she would have continued committing murders if it wasn't for the women I've mentioned. And I would like to celebrate these women, even though media or the records were not good with her. And unfortunately, we do not know her name, and I believe history has not treated her fairly. She is known as Milorad's wife, the man who had an affair with Vera and never came home. Which, heck, I don't believe it's fair. She was the one in the end bringing Vera down, but in an article she's called, "If it wasn't for another jealous woman, Vera Renczi would have not been caught." Why do you have to mention jealous women? Yes, maybe Madame X, because this is how I would like to call her, maybe Madame X was a jealous woman and her need to find out came initially from jealousy, but the fact that she persevered, the fact that she was pushing police, she went back and back and back and pushing police to do their job, this is for me something that is very, very not fair in the history treated. By now, rumors were present in the community, men going to Vera's estate and never to be seen again, but of course were dismissed as servants' gossip. However, our Madame X would have none of it, and finally the police decided to go and discuss with Miss Renczi about Milorad. So remember, Milorad was the husband of Madame X. Vera would put her act together, take out her cunning card. By now she was a specialist, she was an expert into how convincing men and how much charm she must take out in order for these guys to be completely mesmerized by her. So the police almost apologized that she was bothered by their presence. However, one important clue Vera left out during this conversation with the police, she admitted she knew Milorad, but she had nothing to do with his disappearance. Police were happy and left Madame X again, insisted, "No, why are you not going back? Why are you not insisting at Miss Vera Renczi's estate? I know something is going on and I know my husband is disappearing. Why are you not investigating?" I assume Madame X were telling the police. And we do not know if only by talking Madame X would convince police. However, we know that police went there for a second time. And this time, Vera was not as she was the first time. She was starting to lose her act. She was acting nervous and the police saw that. Police asked again about Milorad, and this time Vera said that she doesn't know him and she refused to cooperate any longer. And it seems the cards starting to fall down. She was not able to convince everybody that she didn't have anything to do with Milorad. Thus, police went back for a search warrant, and this is when they asked Vera to show the hidden cellar. So they went directly, and they didn't stay for coffee, they didn't stay just to make sure for the conversation's sake. No, they went there, presented the warrant and said, "I want to see the hidden cellar that all the community is speaking about, and we have none of it, your charming bullshit." At first she refused, but after it was clear she cannot use her charm anymore to get her out of the situation, she simply took the police to her cellar. Even now guys, she stated that in the caskets are her relatives, because once the police went into the hidden cellar, they observed many caskets around her, and they were of course interested to find out who is in that casket. And Vera told everyone that actually all the bodies are of her relatives and they should not disturb it, for of course it's not proper to disturb and to start opening cadavers, or not cadavers, but in this case caskets. So it was definitely something strange and creepy for the police, and they would have none of Vera's explanations and open the caskets. And this is when they discovered 35 caskets, including her own son Lorenzo, who was 10 years old. And in the cellar was as well an armchair, church candles, and a bottle of empty champagne. And this was her little nook, and she would come often to sit and see her victims. Yeah, I have goosebumps when I think about it, because it's almost like a gothic piece of theater or a piece of video. It's just, how was she able to do just that? But it seems Vera was an organized criminal according to the criminal profile. And as well, I'm not a specialist, so I'm only speculating, but she was above average in her intelligence. She planned in advance and knew exactly what she was doing. She had no remorse over her deeds, and she even told police she wanted to be the last woman in these men's lives. So we could see her reasoning behind. And if you want to answer why Vera did what she did, is most likely because she was narcissistic and psychotic at the same time. And there are maybe psychology explanations, and I try to find out more. And I have recently read Dr. Grande's book called The Psychology of Notorious Serial Killers, Personality Theory, and I totally recommend it. I bought it from Amazon, and I'm linking, of course, the book into the description below. And the analysis method based on acronym OCEAN for Vera, to try to find out what exactly was Vera's like. And I see, of course, it's just a speculation. Please don't take it as for granted. But going to OCEAN, I would say O, openness to experience, high. She was adventurous, courageous, to almost being reckless when she escaped boarding school. And she had imagination, considering the fact that she had that cellar with the zinc caskets and with the armchair and all the set that she made for herself. C, consciousness, I would say she was a mid-consciousness. She did her due diligence by hiding her deeds, and she achieved what she set out to do. Even her actions were horrific when she poisoned so many men. Instead, she could have used her consciousness in many other aspects, but of course it wasn't the case. Extraversion, I would say mid-range. She probably had two facet score. On one side, she was assertive, she was sensation seeking, she wanted to feel the thrill when she was doing all this stuff, but not particularly outgoing or friendly with others than her victims, because we know she completely changed her posture and completely changed her behavior when people were not agreeing with her. Now going back to agreeableness, A, mid to high range, I would say Vera knew how to mesmerize men and people around her to get what she wanted with no remorse whatsoever. So she knew how to put her act together. And last, N, neuroticism, I would say she was low. Vera had no impulsivity in performing her deeds. She was not aggressive in terms of killing the man. She had just a different value system than most people in the society, and because she was narcissistic, she would use, of course, as an excuse the fact that the men would not admire her anymore, thus they need and must die. All in all, my assumption is that Vera Renczi was a grandiose narcissist. She had fantasies of power over men in her life, believing she was unique and special, a sense of entitlement. She deserved all the good and the rest not. And we have so many examples in today's society of all these entitled pricks, and I assume Vera was just one of them. She was arrogant, required excessive attention and excessive admiration. Vera would spend her rest of of her life in a mental institution. Those facilities sometimes were worse than prisons. The doctors were using all these horrible procedures on her, such as cold shower or hot showers. They were using electric shock treatments in order to try to cure her disease or her, let's say, ways of doing things, and definitely this was not helping. Of course, we found out that these are more torture methods, but not necessarily curing or helping anybody. And Vera would stay in that asylum until she died of dementia before the beginning of Second World War. So she was pretty young when she died, and according to some sources, even her existence is put into question, since only English language sources can be found from 1925 in an American magazine and not local ones. However, my take on that is that her story is real. Maybe some aspects were fabricated. However, I believe women can do as much harm as men. And just because she was rich, cunning, and deceiving, she managed to get away with her crimes for so long. Vera's story would come to an end now, and I hope you guys enjoy it. It was a really fun and interesting time for me to study and to put all this together.